One of the most popular and financially successful video games of all time, it set the bar for what a fighting game could and would be. Often imitated, repeatedly duplicated, and if you squint really hard, you'll actually get to see the first G.I. Joe movie ever made. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Street Fighter. Street Fighter is a multimedia franchise created by Capcom that debuted in 1987 with the arcade game Street Fighter. That was followed in 1991 by a sequel called Street Fighter II, clearly a more popular game since Street Fighter II has spawned 4 sequels, where Street Fighter only had 1. As long as there have been video games, there have been fighting games. The earliest game I can remember playing was Pong on the Magnavox Odyssey 300, and trust me, if the game wasn't going well for one player, it always ended with a fight. But if we can get serious for a moment, there have been 2-player fighting games since at least 1976 when Sega released Heavyweight Champ in arcades, a basic side-view black and white boxing game with 2 boxing glove levers that moved up and down, allowing players to strike high and low. In 1984, Data East released Karate Champ, which took advantage of improved graphics, faster processing speeds, and a dual joystick interface. Players can now execute over 20 attack and defense moves while competing in a fully 8-bit realized karate tournament versus the computer or another player. That same year, IREM released Kung Fu Master, a side-scrolling fighter or beat-em-up that today is recognized as the birth of the beat-em-up genre. Kung Fu Master director Takashi Nishiyama left IREM to join Capcom, where he was inspired by the success of Data East's Karate Champ to develop a new fighting game. In 1987, Capcom released Street Fighter, directed by Nishiyama, who essentially created a game that was nothing but boss battles from Kung Fu Master. Similar gameplay to Karate Champ in that you could play against the computer or another player, but instead of a tournament-based point system, Street Fighter introduced a health bar. More importantly, Street Fighter introduced the world to a new default control system, joystick plus 6 buttons, and the ability to execute special secret moves like Hadouken or Wave Motion Punch when a specific controller combination was entered. Street Fighter introduced core franchise characters including N-Boss Sagat as well as Ryu from Japan and Ken from the US, wearing karate outfits strikingly similar to the Player 1 and 2 outfits worn by the 2 fighters in Data East's Karate Champ. Street Fighter pulled inspiration from a variety of pop culture media. It's an amalgamation of things like the martial arts tournament from the 1973 movie Enter the Dragon, with the title of the 1974 movie The Street Fighter, and included nods to anime like 1974's Space Battleship Yamato, whose main weapon was the Hado-Ho, or wave motion gun. Nishiyama left Capcom to work for SNK, but development of a Street Fighter sequel continued. However, that sequel was developed more as a response to the success of 1987's Double Dragon, a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Initially titled Street Fighter 89, the name was changed to Final Fight after Capcom got feedback from arcade operators pointing out that Street Fighter 89 was in no way similar to Street Fighter in gameplay or character selection. Ryu and Ken were planned to be included but were scrapped when executives chose to develop the game like a movie with a new setting, new plot, and new characters. Final Fight was a great success for Capcom, especially in the US. It was part of a wave of beat-em-ups that included titles like Captain America and the Avengers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Golden Axe, Batman, and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Those are 2 different games. Can you imagine? That said, as a follow-up to Final Fight, Capcom chose to revisit the original player versus player design of the first Street Fighter game in an attempt to make it even more arcade-friendly than it was. They made improvements to the 6-button controller interface and everything else across the circuit board. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. What's the first thing that pops into your head when I say the 1980s or the 1990s? Don't think about it, just say it. 1, 2, 3, Rubik's Cube. Yes, they have that, or they had that, or they will have that. 80stees.com is constantly refreshing their inventory with officially licensed t-shirts featuring characters, quotes, and logos from cartoons, comics, TV shows, movies, wrestling, and music from the 1970s through the 2000s. So while I can't guarantee that everything you can think of will be in stock, I can guarantee that you'll always be surprised by the range of their selection. 80stees.com has something for everyone. Your favorite heroes like Batman, Spider-Man, Mega Man, Deadpool, and Wolverine, Voltron, both Lion and Vehicle, Star Wars, Stargate, old and older Battlestar Galactica, Motley Crue, Biz Markie, Pink Floyd, and Jimi Hendrix. Find the shirt that's right for you, the one that speaks to your interests, and lets the world know that there's no bigger fan of scratch and sniff stickers, Spam, or Kellogg's Fruit Loops than you. And you can prove it because you're wearing the shirt. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. And thanks again to 80stees.com. Street Fighter II: The World Warrior was released in arcades around the world in March of 1991, with more characters, with more fighting styles and special powers, and more locations, with better animations, better music, and faster gameplay that included the ability to execute combo attacks. Where previous generations of arcade games were more about getting a high score, Street Fighter II leaned into the biggest strength of fighting games over every other genre: fast, two-player, head-to-head competition. And it worked. By the end of 1991, Street Fighter II was the highest-grossing arcade game in the world. To build on that success, Capcom released an update 1 year later in March of 1992 called Street Fighter II Championship Edition. It rebalanced power levels and allowed both players to select the same character in a match through the use of alternate color palettes. It also expanded the selectable roster by making 4 previously unplayable boss characters playable. The core 8 characters, Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, E. Honda, Blanca, Guile, Zangief, and Dalsim, were joined by Vega, Sagat, Balrog, and M. Bison. Fun fact, in Japan, Vega is Balrog, M. Bison is Vega, and Balrog is M. Bison. The character currently known as Balrog was designed as an homage to the character Mike from the original Street Fighter game and Mike Tyson. He was named Mike Bison, which was then shortened to M. Bison. The end boss name swap in the US was done to avoid getting punched out by the actual Mike Tyson. Capcom released 2 more updates, Street Fighter II Turbo in December of 1992, which dialed up the speed of the gameplay and added some new moves, and Super Street Fighter II: The New Challengers in September of 1993, which dialed the speed back down, updated the graphics, the audio, and added 4 new playable characters: T-Hawk, Fei Long, DJ, and Cammy. Changes to the roster and gameplay helped keep Street Fighter II fresh in the face of increasing competition from other fighting games. Games like Mortal Kombat, Shogun Warriors, Samurai Showdown, Virtua Fighter, and Fatal Fury: King of Fighters, created by original Street Fighter director Takashi Nishiyama after he left Capcom. Capcom released a final update in February of 1994 called Super Street Fighter II Turbo, which gave players the option to choose the gameplay speed, added super combos, and another new character called Akuma, or Goki in Japan. He was a secret character only accessible via a code and so powerful that he was banned for use in official tournaments. After just 4 years, Street Fighter II was a globally recognized brand with more than 200,000 arcade cabinets sold. It was responsible for nearly $10 billion in total revenue, which placed it as one of the top 3 best-selling games of all time behind Space Invaders and Pac-Man. On the home console side, Nintendo sold over 6 million Street Fighter II cartridges for the Super Nintendo, a killer app for a system already stacked with killer apps. That kind of success practically guarantees crossover into other media. In 1992, Daiwan Animation produced a very unofficial animated film very loosely based on the characters from Street Fighter II. In 1993, Hasbro recruited the characters from Street Fighter into their G.I. Joe line of action figures and vehicles, an attempt to ride the coattails of the popular game while they diversified the G.I. Joe portfolio in the face of lagging sales. Street Fighter's martial artists joined a slew of soldiers, ninjas, alien monsters, eco-warriors, ATF agents, drug dealers, cyborgs, astronauts, as Hasbro begged children to tell them what they wanted to buy.
It's Capcom Street Fighter 2! What's tougher than a Capcom Street Fighter? A Street Fighter's mother? No! How about the Crimson Cruiser with Championship Edition M. Bison and Street Slammin' missiles? It's not as tough as Championship Edition Guile going boom in his Sonic Boom tank. Or the Beast Blaster. It comes with Championship Edition Blanca and Chun-Li and fires double trouble missiles. Street Fighter 2! Capcom Street Fighter 2, Sonic Boom Tank, Crimson Cruiser, and Beast Blaster come with Championship Edition figures, each sold separately. That's a lot of stuff!
In 1994, 2 movies based on Street Fighter II were released, both attempting to add plot details to a game that previously worked fine without any. In Japan, Group TAC produced Street Fighter II, the animated movie, while in the US, Capcom themselves produced Street Fighter, a live-action adaptation starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia. In this version of the franchise, M. Bison is attempting to take over the world using genetically engineered super soldiers deployed from his hidden base in the fictional country of Shadaloo. That kind of an enterprise requires a lot of cash, so for starters, he's threatening to kill several dozen captured relief workers unless the allied nations of the world cough up $20 billion in 3 days' time. But the allied nations won't stand for that kind of extortion or attempted world conquering. Instead, they deploy a totally not secret, daring, highly trained special mission force led by Colonel Guile and Lieutenant Cammy. Reporting the events on the ground in Shadaloo are journalist Chun-Li and her team, including Balrog and E. Honda. Caught up in the mix are smugglers Ryu and Ken, cage fighter Vega, and arms dealer Sagat. And praying for a release from all of this are M. Bison's resident geneticist Dr. Dalsim and his newest patient, Guile's friend Carlos Charlie Blanca. The only way any of them are getting out of this alive is if they survive the battles that take them to M. Bison's lair and the final fight with M. Bison himself. Capcom knew they had a window to capitalize on the incredible popularity of Street Fighter II, so they sent executives directly to Hollywood, USA to get a film in production. Producer Ed Pressman of Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, and Masters of the Universe fame brought them a pitch that was completed the night before. It was also started the night before. When Pressman got word of the meeting with Capcom, he reached out to veteran writer Steven D'Souza, known for TV shows like Knight Rider and The Powers of Matthew Starr, and movies like 48 Hours, Die Hard, Commando, The Running Man, and Hudson Hawk. D'Souza has said Pressman asked him to write a story by first asking him if he'd ever heard of the game. D'Souza said he played all the time with his kids and that he would be more than happy to write it, he just needed to know when it was due. Pressman said, quote, "Tomorrow."
Damn. We're in a tight spot. Damn! We're in a tight spot. Damn! We're in a tight spot. Damn his ass!
D'Souza said he stayed up all night working on the pitch on the condition that if Capcom bought it, D'Souza would get to direct it. For all his time writing in Hollywood, he'd never directed anything. Not that he had never had the opportunity, he simply prioritized writing over directing. As strange as it sounds, D'Souza didn't want to make a Street Fighter movie that was exclusively about a martial arts tournament. An adaptation that was too direct might suffer the same fate as 1993's Super Mario Bros. D'Souza wanted to make something that had a little more room for adventure, bigger action, and intrigue without being beholden to the details of the game. He pictured M. Bison commanding his army, operating from a secret lair hidden under the tournament arena like a James Bond villain, but with larger sci-fi soap operatic elements like Star Wars. That, it turned out, was exactly what Capcom had been thinking as well, and in their minds, that meant something that was toyetic, as D'Souza said in a 2015 interview, quote, "Interestingly enough, among the materials that Capcom gave me at the time was a long-range plan to make a line of toys which were very similar to the G.I. Joe line of toys, so they were already on the road to a G.I. Joe type direction, so subsequently I've spoken to people who've said Street Fighter is the first G.I. Joe movie." Capcom put up $35 million and scheduled a release date for December 1994. D'Souza wrote draft after draft, constantly butting heads with Capcom, who wanted to include every single character that had been in the games from Ryu and Ken to Balrog and M. Bison. But most importantly, Guile.
Bobby Newport. Bobby Newport.
Despite Ryu being the de facto main character since the beginning, Hasbro's line of action figures was going to be centered on Guile. So Capcom wanted to center the film on him as well, going so far as to request that Guile appear in the film driving a tank at some point because there was a tank in the toy line. Capcom's other motive for centering Guile was that they wanted the film to star the man who they considered to be the biggest action star in the world at the time, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The biggest problem for D'Souza and the rest of the cast is that he cost $8 million of the $35 million budget. That didn't leave much room in the budget for the rest of the cast. Ming-Na Wen, fresh off 1993's The Joy Luck Club, played Chun-Li, Damien Chapa played Ken, Peter Tuiasa Sopo was E. Honda, and while Capcom wanted Ryu to be played by Kenya Sawada, D'Souza insisted on Byron Mann as the better actor with the better English language delivery.
There's these two guys in the film, Ken and Ryu, who are able to make light of their situation, which is just about every 5 minutes in a death situation.
Guile, that's me, Guile. I'm like a very strong, macho.
Bison, that's the character I play. Bison is the king of the bad guys.
Cammy's possibly everything I'm not. And I think it's great that she's a woman in such a powerful position.
Cammy was the last character cast. D'Souza was on a flight to Australia to begin pre-production when he saw a copy of an Australian version of People magazine. On the cover was Kylie Minogue, an international pop star outside the US. D'Souza asked who she was, she auditioned, and despite her short acting resume, won the part. M. Bison was played by Raul Julia. Whether or not he was the best actor for the role, he was willing, and Capcom was happy with the degree of star power he added to the project. Unbeknownst to everyone involved, Julia was battling stomach cancer. D'Souza did everything he could to rearrange the shooting schedule to put Julia's scenes at the end to allow him to gain back the weight. Ultimately, Julia was able to complete his scenes, but it would unfortunately be his final performance. Despite other production complications, like Jean-Claude Van Damme struggling with substance abuse and a close call with a potential coup in Thailand where part of the movie was shot, they were still able to hit the December 23, 1994 release date. Raul Julia sadly passed away a few months before the movie was released. Street Fighter earned just over $33 million, almost its entire budget in the US alone. That's not great, especially for a film that was at least partially developed to sell a line of toys to kids in the US. Luckily, it did another $66 million worldwide, bringing the total to just under $100 million. Reviews for the movie weren't as good as the reviews had been for the games. Most agreed that it was fine for kids who played the games and might buy the toys. But there wasn't much there for adults, and for Van Damme, it was a step backward for what Capcom believed was his megastar profile. Ironically, there were two different video game adaptations of the movie adaptation, one by Incredible Technologies for arcades and another by Capcom for PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Both games used the same live-action movie footage of the actors from the movie, despite the fact that both games were developed independently of each other. And of course, there were the toys. Hasbro produced a full line of G.I. Joe branded Street Fighter action figures loosely based on the series of games in 1993, and a second line released in 1994 with official movie fighter callouts and a picture of Jean-Claude Van Damme on the blister card for the various Guile figures, while the others all had illustrations of the characters from the games. There was a retooled Vamp as the Street Striker, a retooled Dragonfly as the Helifighter, and a retooled 1991 headquarters as M. Bison's Shadaloo headquarters. For all the bluster about Guile and G.I. Joe, the inclusion of Street Fighter did not revive G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe. Heck, it didn't even stop Hasbro from putting Mortal Kombat figures on shelves at the same time. A fatality, since 1994 was the final year of the Real American Hero line that began in 1982. But don't worry, in 1995, Capcom and Graz Entertainment produced Street Fighter, an animated series that ran 26 episodes over 2 seasons from October of 1995 to May of 1997 on the USA Network. For the most part, it was inspired by the games, but it also carried over some plot points from the film. If you didn't catch the animated series when it aired, you can stream it on various platforms. The 1994 animated movie is on Prime Video. The live-action film has been released on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and as of this video, is on Netflix. Street Fighter the movie, underperforming at the US box office with toys floundering on retail shelves, had no lasting impact on the Street Fighter brand. Capcom continued to be the kings of fighting games at the arcades and on home systems with Darkstalkers in 1994 and the launch of X-Men Children of the Atom and Marvel Superheroes in 1995, which kicked off a whole new branch of fighting games made in the image of Street Fighter II. X-Men vs. Street Fighter in 1996, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter in 1997, Marvel vs. Capcom in 1998, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in 2000, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in 2011, and a whole lot of others. The Street Fighter game series returned in 1995 with Street Fighter Alpha, followed by Street Fighter EX in 1996, the long-awaited Street Fighter 3 in 1997, then a decade-long break before Street Fighter 4 in 2008, 5 in 2016, and 6 just last year in 2023. A second live-action film called Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li came out in 2009, a live-action web series called Assassin's Fist in 2014, and its sequel Resurrection in 2016. And just last year, in April of 2023, Legendary Entertainment announced that they had acquired the film rights and were developing a new live-action movie potentially starring Alan Ritchson as Guile, with a release date in March of 2026.
You just inherited a big problem.
And for all you haters out there, according to a report from Automaton Media in June of this year, the 1994 Street Fighter film is still making money. According to an attendee at the Capcom shareholders meeting, the movie still returns, quote, tens of millions of yen each year to this day. Now, according to the current exchange rate, 10 million yen is equal to about $64,000. If it averaged half that every year since 1994, that's nearly $2 million. And while that's not enough to fund the production of a new Street Fighter movie, that ain't exactly nothing. And not for nothing, but last year Jada Toys released their first wave of action figures based on Street Fighter II. Wave 1 featured Ryu, Chun-Li, and Fei Long. Wave 2 released this year added Ken, Dalsim, and N-Boss M. Bison. Wave 3 with Cammy, DJ, and Guile should be out later this year. Why does that matter? Because Street Fighter has maintained its place as one of the most popular and successful video game and pop culture franchises for so long that even I, an original Mortal Kombat fan, have come around to find an entry point into the franchise after decades of resistance, to imagine my own adventures as a fan of Street Fighter II. That joke doesn't work because you can't hear that I said 2, T-O-O, not 2, T-W-O. Stupid! It's stupid! Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. Check out our new Secret Galaxy merch shop at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description below, and let us know in the comments down below, what was your entry point to the Street Fighter franchise? Was it the game? The first game? Was it the second game? Was it some iteration of the second game? Was it the movie? Please Tell me your story if the movie was your entry point to the franchise. I would love to see someone complaining about all this focus on the games. When are they going to release a Jean-Claude Van Damme accurate Guile figure? It's been 30 years. Let's go. There's too many people out there. There has to be someone with that story.
Cut.